Yes.
We appreciate we have class, and I'm sorry that that we were having those technical glitches. So we were discussing last week modesty, and I wanted to continue that discussion, give a little more specific sources and everything. We got some practical information on better materials to shop for. I don't know, Becca, if you looked for the seersucker, but that was a good idea. I wrote it down for myself. All right. So in terms of modesty, as we said, there's many laws. I'm not going to go into it. We don't have so much time now, but there's many laws that speak of in terms of Jewish women of dressing modestly. Many sources for this. Says based on the biblical verse, you should not put a stumbling block in front of the blind from Leviticus. That if we don't follow these laws, it could cause the men to violate laws forbidden, forbidden to them. They're not obviously allowed to see parts of our body that should be covered and are uncovered. So if we're uncovering it, we're messing them up as well. There's a verse in Deuteronomy, you should guard yourself from any evil thing. It says the immodesty causes a divine presence to depart. As it says in Deuteronomy, you should not see among yourself a shameful thing and turn away from behind you. That was the verse I brought in last week in terms of the soldiers having to, cover their excrement. So basically, if we're violating the laws of modesty, we're violating Torah, we're causing others to transgress, as a man's not allowed to see a woman dressed inappropriately, and we cause God's presence to depart. Meaning, even if there are no men around, we still have an obligation to be modest because we're being modest in front of God. And the areas of a woman's body that have to be covered is the neck, below and including the collarbones, front and back. The arms, when we say the arms, we mean the upper arms, including the elbow, and the legs are the thighs, including the knees. A Jewish woman is required to wear a dress long enough to cover her knees when she's standing, when she's sitting, even if she's wearing stockings, leggings, that doesn't count. The legs have to be completely covered by something that wouldn't show their shape. Most say women need to wear stockings, and married women have to cover their hair. Married Jewish women have to cover their hair. There are many details. I could give many more, in terms of the specifics, but those are the basic sketch of the obligations for modest dress for a Jewish woman. Now, where do we see this is applicable to a non-Jewish woman? You could say, okay, well, there's a lot of obligations on Jews. Why are we assuming this has relevance to a non-Jewish woman? So the whole concept of modest dress comes under the prohibition of immorality, right? One of the seven Noahide laws is immorality. Every woman has to behave in a modest way and not cause others to sin through her dress and acting or dressing or speaking, intimating in a way that could bring someone else to sinful thoughts or to sinful actions. And this, again, just as for the Jewish woman, is based on the biblical verse in Leviticus, you shall not put a stumbling block before the blind. Meaning, since non-Jewish men have a number of obligations, dressing inappropriately could bring them to sin, and your bringing them to sin would be a sin. There's two sources in Torah law, which clearly expresses this idea that non-Jewish women have the obligation to dress modestly. And it discusses, the sages discuss the generation of the flood. Of course, the generation of the flood was a very wicked generation, so wicked that God wiped out every human being besides 8, plus one other, plus Og. And it says that the sages say that the woman of that generation, obviously we're talking about non-Jewish women, they're only non-Jewish women, there's no Jews at that time. So when we're talking here about the woman behaving inappropriately, it's all women, it's just Noahides, or should be Noahides. That says they used to walk around revealed below their waist. I don't know exactly what that means. I don't remember if I was there in another lifetime, but in some way they were walking around with below their waist exposed. And it says that's why they were punished by the flood. So here you have the men who are kidnapping, molesting, doing many, many, many wrong things to these women. But these women, by their action and their dress, are considered partners in the sins that were perpetuated. If you're walking around naked, the man is at fault, but what are you doing walking around naked? You know, so you're considered part of the fault. So based on this, the sages say that any woman above 12 should wear modest clothing that covers her whole torso until her collarbone, her legs until her knees, and her arms until her elbows. That's basically the scope of area of body that we are supposed to modestly cover. Meaning, if you're covering all that, but with this skin tight outfit, slash or not in neon colors, it doesn't work. It has to be covered in such a way that we can't see, not so clearly at least, the form of the body underneath. Now, so that's one big significance of modesty, is to prevent sin. But it's not the only reason for modesty, because then if you were in an area where there's no other people around, you would say, okay, I'm not bringing anyone to sin. There's nobody around. I'm home. My doors are locked. My windows are shuttered. I mean, I can do whatever I want here because I know I'm alone. I'm not going to bring anyone to sin. But we're told no. You are a creation of God. The idea of being a creation of God is for all mankind. That's not a Jewish concept. That is for mankind. All mankind is a creation of God made in his image. So when we're looking at our body as something that we should properly, respectfully cover, this shows fear of God and respect for mankind, respect for God's image that he graciously endowed on us. So when we're looking at ourselves that way, we're looking at ourselves as God formed us. And God formed us in a way that reflects him. And if I am being cheap, trashing my body in terms of my respect for it, it's like I'm not really respecting God, who's created me in a fashion that I reflect him. I'm not really respecting him if this is how I treat the body that he made in his image. Now that's where, yes, Rebecca?
Well, I was just thinking not only that, but thinking back to Adam and Kala, when they were created, they had a covering of light, weren't they, before they ate of the tree that they weren't supposed to. So then after they ate of that tree, they no longer had that light covering, right? So then they had to cover with something. They weren't allowed to just walk around without the light or anything covering them.
Absolutely.
Is that okay?
Absolutely. I mean, there's different understandings of what exactly the world was like before they ate from the tree. So we don't exactly know, but we definitely know that afterwards they had to, there's two different versions in the Midrash what they were covered with. Either they were covered with whatever, there's furs or the leaves, or like maybe on the other hand, it was a special skin from nails, which really reflects a very high spiritual energy. I mean, there's a lot of different understandings on exactly what it was like before, exactly what it was like after, because Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, were on a very, very high spiritual level. A lot of people misunderstand, like many, they get a very bad rap. So they're not understood on the level of what they truly were. And as such, it's like, oh yeah, whatever. No, there was a lot of spiritual stuff going on there, including in their clothing. But yes, definitely the broad concept is true. After the sin, there was a need for them to be dressed, even though you could say again, hey, it's just the two of them. No. Once evil has been internalized in this fashion, there's a need to be dressed. Absolutely. If a person is not dressed modestly and they're exposing their body, especially where other people are around, it's considered like almost like expressing a disbelief in God. Because if your body is made in God's image, if your body is expressing you as a creation of God, and you're not being respectful of that body, then it's like not respecting God. Either it could express a disbelief that there's a God that you need to respect, or it could express a disbelief that God's watching you at this moment. Like people could say, I believe in God and I believe we're made in God's image, but I'm not bothering him now by what I'm doing. You think that's what he's involved with? Like watching me and seeing how I'm dressed? Yes. Yeah, he is. He's involved in watching every single thing and all of creation, including each one of us and including how we speak and we're dressed and even how we think and feel every moment. So it would either express a disbelief in God or a disbelief that God's watching, or a disbelief that I'm creating God's image, so it makes a difference. You know, animals can be naked, so why is man any different? You know, there are sages speak about this at length, that this person who, if a person feels comfortable not respecting their body, it's showing on some level this lack of belief in some part of God's presence. Is that he's there, or that he's watching, or that he made you in his image. Something is off. Because if you had all those pieces in place, if you believe in God, and you believe God's watching you, and you believe God made you in his image, then there would be a natural response of respecting that image, respecting the God that's watching you, respecting the God that's with you, and being honest. Now, the idea of women covering their hair for Noahide women, it speaks of the Talmud, that this was the custom of Gentile women in the times of the Talmud to cover their hair when they were outside their home, or even if they were in their home, but if there were other men there besides their own husband. So in their home, if other men were around, and for sure outside their home. And this is discussed in the Talmud in Sanhedrin, page 58b, that this was a custom. On the very simple level, you could say it's distinguishing and making a clear demarcation. Hey, I'm married, you know. Nowadays, it is not the custom, meaning the average woman does not have the sense of, if another man's around, I should cover my hair. Or if I'm walking outside my house, I should cover my hair. I mean, they don't have that sense for covering any part of their body, so for sure not their hair. So that's not the custom. So is it an obligation or not? So the answer the sages give nowadays, when it's not the norm for Gentile women, is modest and pious married women should cover their hair. That is how it's expressed. Modest and pious married women should cover their hair. So that means there's a certain wiggle room. Of course, all of us want to be modest and pious, so it would be appropriate, but there is a wiggle room of saying it's not as obligatory as everything else. So if a person is right now struggling to upgrade their modest dress, and they have difficulty, you know, covering themselves till their collarbone in the front and in the back, and covering their arms all the way till their elbows, and covering their torso all the way past their knees. If you're struggling with that area, which is more important, that or covering your hair? That, because that's not optional. Collarbone, front and back, arms till the elbows, torso till the knees, that is mandatory. That is part of God saying, be moral. It's one of the 7 Noahide laws, and it is not an option. It is mandatory. Covering the hair is, Dixie?
Are you saying to the elbows or over the elbows?
Over the elbows, past the elbows.
Okay.
You mean it has to be covered through the elbow, just like the torso has to be covered past the knees.
Okay, gotcha.
The knee would be the
Okay.
demarcation line, but not a demarcation line up until, but past. Like
Okay.
the torso from the collarbone, including the collarbone, on both sides, collarbone front and collarbone back and collarbone on the sides, the whole collarbone, straight
Gotcha.
down till past the knees, that the knees are completely covered. The arm until past the elbows, that the elbows are completely covered. And all that is mandatory. Mandatory for me,
Gotcha.
mandatory for you. Just like God doesn't allow you to steal, God doesn't allow you to show your body in that area. Additionally, so again, on one hand, of course, I believe everyone in the class is a modest, pious woman. If not, wouldn't go to be on the class. On the other hand, if you're struggling, because of course, we all struggle and we all try to get better and better. And the basic torso of your body, you're struggling with covering, understand that's mandatory. And the hair is considered a virtue. And we also discussed that in terms of pants, there is a permission, not for a Jewish woman is not allowed to wear pants, but for a Noahide woman to wear loose fitting pants. There would be an option. Again, it might be admirable not to, but there'll be an option too. But covering the body from the collarbone, including the collarbone, down through the elbows and through the knees is not optional. This is what God is dictating. So for many Noahide women, this might be the hardest law of all the laws.
Yeah, well,
It is.
It
I
is.
can
Okay, I got two people that
Yeah.
said yes.
because
Yeah.
I can say that I'm definitely more modest now than I ever have been since I don't know when. So I'm definitely much more modest, but I'm not as modest as what you're describing. And that will take some time and effort to get there, because at the stores that I have available to me, I mean, just physical stores, there's not that many kind of options. It's almost like you have the option to cover your legs and not your top, or you have the option to cover your top and not so much of your legs in the styles. So
Now
then
you wonder why
I
you didn't learn
find
how to
that
sew.
so yes. And so then it's like, okay, well then I have to layer some sort. I either have to layer at the top or I have to layer at the bottom. And now, so I have to choose.
So what I do first of all, you are not limited. The world is a global village. You could go online and just go to a place that you
I
know
can
is
go
free
online.
returns,
Yeah.
because obviously you don't want to pay for shipping everything back. That's no good.
Yes.
Generally, tops, I find a problem. And there's one of three options. Like you said, either you layer, meaning you could get like a tight, I call it a dickie. That's what it was called when I was a child. I don't call it a dickie anymore. You get a tight little dickie that you wear underneath. So whatever shirt you wear over, your collarbone is covered, as we're demonstrating by the tight little dickie.
And Danielle sent me some links that I can look on.
Something else that I do is, again, other people don't. I don't know if it's the smartest way to do it, but I don't sew and I'm not looking to spend a lot of money. So a lot of times in the back of my, especially like a dickie or a shirt that's covered by my hair, by my wig, I'll safety pin it. I'll put like 2 safety pins to like pull it up. So it's sometimes 1, so that doesn't work. Sometimes 2, 1 on either side on the back of my neck, just to pull it up, because almost everything is cut too low. I mean, that's just normal. The world is not selling things that your collarbones are covered. So if you're not going to buy, there are, I say, like, so to speak, Jewish stores, Jewish lines that are very expensive. But if you're not looking to spend a lot of money, I find it much more economical to buy regular and safety pin them. And I do know some people that are, a more high level than me. They don't safety pin, but they'll take to a seamstress, and the seamstress will fix it up and make it proper. So if you're a seamstress and you know how to sew, it's a great use of your talents. If you don't know how to sew, God should send you a reasonable seamstress in your area I happen to have reasonable seamstress in my area, but for my shirts, I generally use safety pins. And yes,
And also,
finding a shirt that you don't need a safety pin is like, or a seamstress is pretty rare.
and you can also use scarves, like those
Scarves.
little lightweight scarves. That's what I
Smart.
use.
That's
Yeah,
smart.
I
That's
could
smart.
do that.
That's smart. That's
I
smart.
could do that. Yeah. Otherwise, yeah, it'll take me a little finagling, and in some ways it may take just saving a little money and buying a piece or two here, piece or two there. You know, it will take me a little bit of time
Building up
to
a
just
wardrobe.
adjust and build
Building
up a wardrobe. Yeah, because I've spent this much time getting myself to the level
To the
that
point
I'm
where you
at
are,
now.
and you're like, I feel so modest, and then I come and blow it all away.
And then I'm like, well, now, okay.
But you know what? I think it's good because this is really something that's difficult for us and costs money, which is difficult. And, you know, we could have some things in our wardrobe that are so beautiful and precious to us. And we're like, God, I love you more. I love you more. I'm taking it out. I love you more. If it feels difficult for you, which is so normal, if it feels difficult and just, it feels difficult to many, just challenge yourself to take a step. And when that feels natural, take another step. And God so appreciates each step of our journey. This is not so only for modest dress. This is so for everything in our life. God appreciates every step of our journey, especially if it's really challenging. And very often, and I tell this to myself all the time, the really difficult is where I'm really serving God. In other words, if it's natural for me to pray and it's so comforting to pray and I feel so good when I pray, that's completely serving God. But it's not so difficult. So I'm not really absolutely nullifying myself to God at this moment. It feels good. I'm so happy I can talk to him like this. If I say Psalms, God wants me to say Psalms. But if I say Psalms and I feel so good that I have this relationship with God and he can hear my voice and they give me such comfort, it's serving God, but it's not an absolute negation of self to God. If I give charity, and of course charity is money, and it's hard to give away money, but I feel good. I'm helping people that are in more dire straits than mine. And I know that charity is a blessing. And the more I give, the more God will flow literally blessings of money right back to me. I know God gave me this money to give away to others. So it's serving him. I wouldn't do this if he didn't tell me to, but it's not so hard. But if covering your collarbone is really hard,
It is
harder than prayer, harder than Psalms, harder than honoring parents, harder than charity. If it's really hard, then it's really giving God that absolute service. And maybe a way to start also taking that other step is looking through your closet and taking out 5 things and giving them away. Or throwing them out, depending on if you think it's possible for another person to use them for modest clothing. Because if not, you wouldn't be giving them away to someone else to do the wrong thing. But take out 5 things that, it's hot. God would never want you to wear those 5 things. Just take them out. So at least you just remove 5 things. And then maybe in a week, take out another 5 things and take out another 5 things. That's a way of connecting to God, a way of serving him, way of saying, I'll never wear those really tight pants or that tank top or this or that. Just take it out, take it out, take it out, take it out. That sleeveless shirt, just keep taking it out. And then as your closet gets smaller and smaller, you have no choice. You have to buy clothing. Okay, so, you'll buy more clothing. And God will help you and you'll find great stuff on sale.
That would be the key. We're low income. So yeah, it'll take a little finagling. We do have thrift stores in the area. So yeah, it'll take adding a little here and a little there.
Fashion, and she's a great thrift shopper, and she's trying to actually make a business of thrifting and then reselling it.
Hey,
Because she
that's a
can
wonderful
find, because
idea.
she find, yeah, I mean, she thrifts for what she calls, I don't know, vintage clothing. And then she resells it because people, if they're going to a store and buy vintage clothing, it costs so much money. She thrifts, she finds things so cheap, and then she resells it. So for those that have the
Wonderful
flair
idea.
for it, thrifting is great. It's a great way to shop. You can't do it online. Actually, you even can, she tells me, but it's not worth it. If you really want to thrift,
Right.
go to the stores to get much better prices. And it is a way to pick up some really beautiful things that could be modest and will cost pennies compared to what you'd find in any store. It's a great
Yeah.
commercial. I never do it. I don't have any patience for shopping. I don't have any time for shopping. I don't like shopping.
I don't
But for
either.
people that have a little more patience than me for shopping, it's a great idea.
My as far as shopping goes, my challenge is my vision. I don't see well, so I have to really get up close and see, and it takes more time than what I like. I'm used to just walk in, look, okay, I like this, and get it, and now it takes more time. So, it is
You
what it
say,
is.
God, this is my gift to
Everything,
you. I am
yeah,
sure God will create the resources for you to find things that are modest and that you should feel beautiful in. I think that's also a point we didn't
yes,
really stress, but I think that that's an important point, that God doesn't want us to be so modest that, okay, how do I not really modest when I feel really ugly? Okay, I did it. I'm good. I'm really modest. No, God, that is not God's vision. You might have
no,
heard that at some point. You might have heard it even from misguided Jewish sources, but it is not God's vision. It is nowhere expressed that way among our sages. A woman should be beautiful, attractive, not attracting. We're not looking to be attracting, but we're look to be attractive and
right.
beautiful. And we should buy things that make us feel beautiful and that are modest. And it's really, I think for a lot of women, it's a real eye opener to dress in a way that's could be beautiful but covers our body instead of exposes our body. It creates a whole different like body relationship, because the world, even though of course we're not trying to objectify ourselves, but still the world does a good job of objectifying us, and
Yes.
therefore we sort of absorb that message as well on some level. That we
Mhm.
sort of look at ourselves as a woman, a body. On some level, it seeps into all of us. And when you're looking at these laws, God is so clearly saying, don't look at yourself as a body. Is that what you have to offer, is a body? Look at yourself as a human, as a person with personality, with intellect, with vision, with
Mhm.
great things that someone should be interested in. You, not your body, not a body for sale, you're a person. So when you're looking at these laws, and if you're mentoring any young women or girls with these laws, it's really beautiful, because the message really is you're supposed to be a beautiful person, but never express yourself as here's my body. You never want to be like, here's my body. Because then people would think like that's how you view yourself, like your value system is a body. And unfortunately, there's many women in this world that their value system has become their body, that their body is what they've been trained to believe expresses their value. And that probably feeds into a lot of the reasons why women torture their bodies the way they do, the way they
Can I
eat.
make a comment?
Sure, Dixie.
Well, it happens. It's our society did that to us because
Absolutely.
the men would not look at women that were dressed modestly and that didn't attract them sexually. So the women, to even get a husband would do that. And I was one of them, because how else could you get a husband? Because
Yes,
they would not even give you the time of day. That is our
exactly.
society.
Yep.
And so, I was blessed to get a husband that it wasn't all that dependent on, but that's why I think our society has went that way terribly.
So if you would be talking to a woman today, let's say an 18, 20-year-old Noahide girl who's committed to dressing modest, is she supposed to think she's not going to get a husband? I think she'll get a very good husband, one that's not just looking for a body.
No, I agree. But I'm saying today that's possible. When I grew up, it was not possible. Our society at that time when we grew up had become perverted.
You think now society is better?
No. I'm saying it has a better chance of people dressing modestly because more people are becoming aware. Because more people are becoming aware of modesty again.
I see what she's saying. Yeah.
When I grew up, the modesty wasn't taught. Now modesty is being taught again.
Yes.
That's interesting. So you see a shift in the world that in certain areas, because it went so bad, or for whatever other reason, people are coming back to the value of modesty.
Because we never really wanted to be dressed like that. It was to fit into society, to that place in society that we dressed like that, because it was at that time the norm. And now it's shifting back to people seeing that isn't the norm.
That's
that
so
you don't run around half naked. But not that a lot of people are seeing it, but like a lot of people like me, I didn't realize it was wrong how I was dressing, but people are starting to see that. And granted, there's probably not a lot of us, but still we can make a difference, because I do. I get after my nieces and my granddaughter and stuff on their dress, and they know that they better come dressed right to my house, because they can't come in if they don't.
I gotta go get my charger real quick.
That's good, Dixie. So your granddaughter and your niece have a chance, because you're trying to also give them this message that respect yourself, and then a man will respect you.
Exactly. And the fact is too, I've told them, I don't care how you dress, but when you come around my husband at my house, you'll be dressed, because he does not need to be he doesn't intentionally, but men are men. And you come here dressed. That's the bottom line. And yeah, I mean, we have to start somewhere. And Jack was getting very aware of trying to guard his eyes, even on just regular thing. Even when he went to work, if people would come out dressed terribly, he would try and guard his eyes, but you can only guard them so much, because all of a sudden you just see this person walk in front of you. It's like, oh my God. And so it was affecting him too. All this was affecting him also. He was trying.
I'm curious, Danielle, are you in a place where you can talk? Because Danielle's so much younger. I'm curious if she sees it as you see it, that more in the world is giving that message. Danielle, do you see that also?
So, I mean, I'm not sure. For me, I always assumed it was perspective and the situations I was putting myself in and how I assumed it changed. So, growing up, modesty was really never spoke of. I mean, you dressed for the weather, right? That's how I grew up. If it was hot, you wore a sleeveless shirt. If it was cold, you wore a jacket. Everybody wore pants. Skirts or dresses were for major occasions, or, if you were dressing up to look your best kind of thing. But, I always knew growing up that, you're not supposed to have a low neckline. That was very I guess that is a point of modesty that I understood and that I grew up with, that, you never want your chest to show, right? You should always cover your chest. That was important. You don't wear short shorts, those kind of things. So I guess it was from a perspective, but as I'm getting older, I mean, obviously in Chicago, it was kind of a different perspective, but up here, with just, a different type of population, I think people are more aware of it. It was interesting. I was watching a video earlier where a woman was talking about some popular trend of clothing right now. I think it's like crop tops or something, which means you show your belly. Essentially, you wear a very short shirt. And she wasn't Christian, but she mentioned that she didn't mention Christianity, but she said it's important not to show your midriff and to cover yourself. Actually, she said to your knee, but I just thought it was interesting because I just came across it on a website, and I just found that interesting because I don't really hear a lot of people, like, for example, online outside of specific, like, religious community based people talk about how things aren't modest in our current culture when it comes to what's fashionable right now. So, but I always feel like a lot of this is your perspective and what you're paying attention to and what you're watching and what you're thinking about, and the kind of people you're surrounding yourself with, of course. But I notice, like, I personally notice a difference when, like, for example, and I notice myself too. So if I'm with somebody and it's kind of warm out or whatever, and they're in like a sleeveless shirt and their bra strap is showing, it's a perfect example. It happens all the time. And, you know, it's like, okay, well, I have my shirt on, you know, to my elbow, and, you know, they'll be like, aren't you hot? Why don't you just take that off? And I'm like, well, I am hot, but I'm always hot. Even if I took the shirt off, I would still be hot. But, you know, because I know that God doesn't want that for me, and it's not modest, and it's important for me to continue being modest. And, you know, I've noticed other people be like, oh, well, I never even thought about that. Or, oh, well, you know, tell me more about it. I think people are interested if it's not something that they've heard. Like growing up, it's like, oh, okay, well, you should cover your chest or not wear short shorts because it's inappropriate. You don't want, you know, boys or men looking at you like that. That's not the kind of men that you want to attract, essentially, is what I grew up being told. And so it's more, and it is true, but it's more than that. It's more than just, you know, it's because God doesn't want that from you. And, you know, it can go further than that. And for me, that's what helps me, because it's not, I mean, I'm not young and attractive anymore. So I'm not worried about, you know, anything like that anymore, but it's important to me, you know, and I'm sure my husband doesn't.
What message do you give your daughters?
Yeah, that's where, yeah, I mean, you know, Lavana's 4, and where we've had issues or where it's been challenging lately is she's been doing ballet and dance, and their costumes are not modest. They don't cover their arms. And so it's actually been kind of something that I've been thinking a lot about, especially this summer. And with her having like her recitals and stuff, and her outfits are they're not revealing, but they aren't modest. And so, you know, she told me actually when she got her recital outfit, she said, Mommy, there's not sleeves. I couldn't believe she said that to me. She said, Mommy, there's not sleeves. And I said,
I bet if you spoke to the director and said, can I get a matching sleeved,
right.
whatever, t-shirt to put under it.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So those are the kind of things that I'm starting to come across.
I remember many years ago when Hannah Mary, who's 32, was a little girl.
Sure.
And my, and I guess it was for a wedding, and someone had picked out an outfit for her and her 2 cousins, 3 girls. And it was a little girl, but it was see-through the top. I mean, the top of the top. And I lined it. You know, I didn't line it. I took it to a seamstress who lined it. And so hers was lined and the other 2 girls were not. And honestly, hers looked much more beautiful. You know,
I'm sure. Yeah.
It looked more beautiful. It looked like, I remember like those people saying like, oh, wow, like that one looks so much like, they couldn't at first figure out what the difference was because they're matching. And they're like, oh, it looks so much better. You know, there's a beauty to, yes. You know, so I'm sure if you ask for if you could wear a t-shirt under, you know, under whatever it is, you know, or something like that, hopefully the teacher would be amenable, and she'll look so beautiful. And you'll tell her how
Yeah.
beautiful she looks. But that's very nice that she had that sense of like, wait, where are the
Yeah,
sleeves?
she did. Yeah, she did. Because if she gets like clothes from family or friends or whatever, that are tank tops, which I wouldn't have them wear it anyway because I am kind of obsessive about direct sun on shoulders. But, and like, so I have them wear like sun guards a lot, which are long sleeve in the summer, full long sleeve, not even just to the elbow, just to protect their skin as well. And so they're very used to that. And me too, right? They don't see me, running around outside in a crop top. So she definitely noticed that right away. She's like, and her outfit last year had a bit of a sleeve to it. So she was like, what? There's no sleeves to this, mommy. And I was like, yeah.
There was an experiment they did once with, I think it was children of Israel, and they showed them a picture of, I forget the name, some famous Israeli general who has had a patch on one eye. And they showed the picture, it was part of some study, and they showed the picture to many children, like, what's he missing? Obviously, the answer is his eye. And these Taimani children coming from a very strong religious background. I mean, they showed also to religious kids who said his eye, but very, very strong religious background. When they showed them the picture, I said, what he's missing, they said his kippah. Like, to them, that was obvious what was wrong. Like, I mean, the eye, Mela, okay, whatever, he doesn't have an eye. He doesn't have a yarmulke. Like, what's going on here? That's so weird. That was what caught their eye right away. So when your daughter right away says, where are the sleeves? That's a good sign. That means that's what she sees is missing. That's good that she realizes that. But that is hard, like Dixie's saying, and I agree with her vision of how she was raised, I think is still true for most of society. This is how you have to dress. This is how you dress if you're normal. This is how you dress if you're saying at a certain point, want a man to notice you, an appropriate man, but you want to be, in the running. So you need a very strong value system to say, you know what? You're the man that's going to notice you is the man that wants something high quality. That's the one that's going to be looking in your direction because he's going to say, wait, this girl's quality. Becca?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I can kind of relate to what Dixie was saying because back when I was going to high school, back when I was a teenager, the boys they didn't look at the girls that were covered. They you didn't, if at least that's how I felt. I felt like nobody would notice me unless I was showing something. But I am seeing nowadays there's much more like evangelicals. It's more in the religious communities, but there has been more of a shift recently toward modest dressing, and I'm seeing a lot
So nice.
more
You're saying that's what you're saying
modest.
Dixie said. I didn't know that. It's so nice to see.
I'm
It's so nice to hear
seeing
that.
more. Now, a few years ago, there was some Facebook friends, one of my relatives actually, where I had been posting things about modesty. And so there was a bit of a backlash about that. It's like, well, I'm not going to suffocate in the heat just because people think I need to be modest, rah, 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 and so then I wrote something in kind of a response. It's like, well, nobody's saying that you have to wear a full body burqa and hijab here, and just leave here, have the eye slits, but you want to be noticed more for your personality, for who you are, not for your body parts, so I was already starting to shift, and after that, I really had seen a lot more of a shift towards modesty. I've been seeing a lot more websites of people selling modest clothes. Now, granted, sometimes it wasn't what I would consider modest, but it was modest for them, in that it was more modest than what most people were considering to be modest, so there's being more of this shift towards modesty, and I have noticed that it is starting to even spill over into some of the secular areas too, where people are starting to think, yeah, I want to be noticed more for who I am than for my body parts.
That's so
So
beautiful.
yeah.
And Danielle, I think that's great, that conversation you have, which I guess all of you have. Obviously, I don't really have this conversation so much, but sometimes in different situations, but just this conversation of like, why are you wearing that? I mean, in the summer, everyone always tells it's much easier to be modest in the winter. But in the summer, why are you wearing that? And the answer of, I want to be modest. And they'd be like, what? What'd you say? Oh, you meant you're scared of the sun and no, I want to be modest. What?
Yeah.
What are
Even
you worried about? Who are you scared of? I want to be modest in front of God. And or depending on who you're trying to sell this alternative thinking to, I don't want to be viewed as a body. Exactly what you're saying, Becca. This is Lubavitcher Rebbe says this very strongly in terms of honesty. I don't want to be viewed as a body. I want to be viewed as a person.
the last few years I went to the pool, I have noticed more and more women and little girls wearing, now granted, most of them, what they're wearing is they're wearing workout clothes, but they are covered. They're wearing the long sleeve. I mean, it still kind of shows their form sometimes,
I understand.
but they're wearing
We call them cover-ups. I don't know what the world calls them. We call them cover-ups.
They're wearing the capris and the long sleeved tops and everything. And some of them will wear like a little shirt or shorts over them at the pool, where most people, are wearing. But more and more people are starting to dress.
I remember
like
when
that,
I was a
dress
girl,
like
when I was a girl, my aunt had come, I guess it was the summer, visiting us, and we went swimming. Of course, we went to a Orthodox Jewish pool that had hours for women and hours for men, because men and women do not go to the pool at the same time. So we went women's only hours. And my aunt, I remember, I was a little girl, but I remember this made such an impression on me. She's like, oh, she never enjoyed swimming as much because it was the only time she ever went there where she felt completely relaxed. She knew no one was looking at her body. It was such a different experience. You could just enjoy swimming, enjoy being in the water, enjoy being in the sun. She didn't have this conspicuous feeling of my body. I'm being looked at. I'm being judged. I'm being evaluated. Nobody's looking at me. It's a bunch of women and girls. So yes, I agree with you. When you see that that's now sold, these cover-ups, again, I didn't know if it was only a religious Jewish concept or it's part of the world as well, but definitely in the religious world, this is this concept of wearing cover-ups when you're at the pool. And it's definitely, but I think, again, and maybe you have to sort of judge your audience. Should you say both? Should you, but definitely those two messages, the next time someone asks you, why are you dressing that way? I'm being modest. I'm enjoying being modest. We'll pretend. Yeah. I'm enjoying being modest. Why would you want to be modest? God's everywhere. I want to be respectful in God's presence. I want to attract him, not chase him away. And I don't want to be viewed by the world as a body. I'm not trying to objectify myself. The world does that to women enough. I want to be viewed as a person. I think that message, I want to be viewed as a person, not a body, you could honestly say to almost any woman in the world. It would be really hard for me to imagine a woman that couldn't hear it and let it sink in a little bit. Oh, well, I don't think of men. It's not my problem how they look at me. I just dress for how I want to look. Well, I mean, maybe, but you know what? People are going to react toward you as they perceive. So even though you have no intentions besides comfort, but if a man's looking at you and he thinks it's a body for sale, he's going to be treating you in a certain way that he wouldn't treat if he thought you were presenting yourself as a person. Right. So
that's where
Dixie, yeah.
That's where my daughter-in-law and I got in a really big argument when the granddaughter was even young. And unfortunately, most of society feels this way, that it's the woman's body. She can dress however she wants, and it's up to the man to control himself. And unfortunately, That's why people get raped. That's why they get attacked. And we argued about that for quite a while. I don't know what her feelings are now, but I do know we are responsible for the actions that we create that we cause somebody else to create. And,
right. And that's what
women
the
do not
sages were
want to,
saying about the woman in
right,
the times of the flood. That even though the
right,
men were the aggressors, if a woman's
yeah,
dressing naked,
yeah,
a man's an aggressor, he's completely at fault for being an aggressor, but she's completely at fault for drawing attention to her body in such a way that he's noticing her as his victim. Again, I'm not whitewashing any man. Obviously, an
Right.
aggressor
no,
is an aggressor, is an
but a
Right.
aggressor.
man,
But why are you part of the cycle? Why
well,
are
the
you allowing
problem
yourself
too
to be
is
part of it?
we're different than men. People don't understand. We have two different roles to play. The men
Mhm.
is the, how do I want to put it? The woman is basically responsible to arouse the man to create, bottom line. And so,
Mhm.
and the man, when he gets aroused to create, will attack, basically. I mean, I'm not saying attack, I'm saying, will respond to that arousal because that is the thing that causes the reproduction of the human race. It goes right clear back to basics. And the
Mhm.
women have got to take responsibility not to arouse the animal part of the man.
Yeah. And you're right. They
But
just
I'm
don't
saying
understand.
when you're saying that, Dixie, and you're saying you had this discussion with your daughter-in-law and she got very upset at you, and or people will throw back at you when you say, I want to be modest, I don't want to be objectified, I want to be viewed as a person, not a body. And they'll say, well, I mean, so there's some sick guys on the street. That wasn't your problem. Like they have their problems. Why do you have to be uncomfortable because of them and their problems?
Exactly.
I think what you're saying is again very correct. I don't want to be within this cycle. And how I dress is how I'm going to be viewed and how people are going to respond to me. Like I was thinking, Danielle was saying how, non-COVID times, all of her colleagues are men. So if she's the only woman and a bunch of men and she's dressing as the world feels is normal for a woman, she's obviously going to be drawing attention to herself as a woman and as a body. And the more she covers her body, the more she can be treated as actually a colleague, not the woman. So even though it's not only for the sick men out there, it's for every man out there. We want to train
every man is human.
Exactly.
That's what we are. We're human. We're not above humanity.
Exactly.
And any man, I don't care how righteous he is, in the right situation will fail.
You're right.
That is just the way it is. My thing is, I don't want to cause another person to fail because I don't want their sin on my head. And that's where I'm coming from now. And the other thing is, my hardest thing right now is to understand that God is watching me still. Jack's gone, but God is still watching me. And I still have to be modest. And that is really tough because I slip on that.
Right, because I'm alone. My doors are locked. My windows are shuttered. I'm all alone. Why can't I be comfortable in the summer? And it's because God, you exactly like it says in the verse. You don't want God to be chased away from your camp.
No, I don't.
Chases him away. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But I do feel that this conversation will come up, just especially in the summer. And every time it comes up, it's a golden opportunity to put ideas in someone else's head, plant a few seeds. You might not see them immediately flowering, but it's just like Dixie said, she had a very unpleasant conversation with her daughter-in-law. Maybe it was a few years later where her daughter-in-law thought about that. Maybe by that time she thought it was her own idea. Who knows? Or remembered it was Dixie's and just came to understanding the truth in that. So sometimes we have to hear something many, many, many times until we get it. But we definitely have this as a golden opportunity in the summer to give people the message, God is watching. I want God to feel welcomed in my environment. I want his presence in my life. And I don't want people, not that people, I don't have to worry about what they do. I do or I don't. Maybe someone will say, like, why do you have to worry about what men are doing? It's their problem, not yours. I don't want to be viewed that way. I'm not looking at that to be my relationships with people. I'm respected for me, not from interested in because of my body. Anyway, we went quite over time. Have a
Yeah.
wonderful week. Becca, these 2 classes were in your honor.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you so
Hope they help
much.
you in your journey.
Yes.
And hope they help all of us, because all of us are definitely journeying, and all of us definitely
I needed this
always need
reminder.
work.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Danielle,
Thank you.
Dixie, me, we all need it. And anyone else gonna watch this class, every woman needs this. We always need it. Good for all of us to hear, sometimes
Amen.
many time, again and again.
Amen.
Have a wonderful week. A
Shavua
blessed week.
Tov.
You too.
Shavua Tov.
Shabbat Tov,
Shavua Tov.
everyone.
Shavua Tov.